Welcome back to Going Deep on NDEs. You know, we always bring you the most mind-blowing stories, and today is no different. Get ready for a wild ride as we uncover the truly shocking NDE of soldier George G. Ritchie.
Yeah, Ritchie's story is one of those that just grabs you and doesn't let go. It's not just about surviving death, it's about what he experienced during those 9 minutes he was clinically dead. A journey through both heaven and hell.
We're talking 1943 Army recruit stationed in Texas, and pneumonia was a big deal back then. So Ritchie gets hit with it, they move him to isolation, and, well, things take a turn for the worse. No pulse, no breathing, and the doctor declares him dead.
It was a pretty routine situation at the time, unfortunately. They covered it with a sheet and were about to send him to the morgue. But then, just 9 minutes later, the attendant thought he saw Ritchie's chest move.
Hold on, so they were literally about to send him to the morgue?
Yeah, they were. No vital signs or anything, but the attendant managed to convince the doctor to inject adrenaline directly into Ritchie's heart, and somehow his pulse returned. He started breathing again.
Wow, talk about a close call. That's pretty incredible. But I hear this is just the beginning of Ritchie's story.
Oh yeah, this is just the start. The recovery itself was amazing, but the real story starts when Ritchie wakes up 4 days later. What he described during those 9 minutes of clinical death is mind-blowing.
So it's not just about surviving death, but about what he saw and experienced while he was gone.
Exactly. Out-of-body experiences, encounters with Jesus, glimpses of a hellish realm, even a glimpse of a heavenly city of light. It sounds like something out of a movie, but Ritchie claims it was all too real.
Okay, let's take it from the top. So he's at Camp Barkley, gets sick with pneumonia, right?
Yeah, he's moved to that isolation room, and his condition just keeps getting worse. He actually becomes delirious, fixated on catching a train to Richmond.
He even mentions trying to convince soldiers and medical staff that he had to get to Richmond. He even thought they were taking him to the train station when they were moving him to the X-ray department for tests.
That's right, and this is where it gets really interesting because this is when his out-of-body experience seems to begin. He's in the X-ray room, lying there, and then suddenly...
Wait, so he just pops out of his body just like that? Was he aware of what was happening?
Well, it wasn't that instantaneous. He described it as waking up, realizing he was missing his uniform, and then seeing someone else lying in his bed. Imagine how disorienting that must have been.
I can only imagine. That would be jarring, to say the least.
Totally. His first thought was to find his clothes, still fixated on catching that train to Richmond. But as he moved through the hospital, something strange started happening. People weren't reacting to him, like they couldn't see him or hear him.
Didn't he say he tried to talk to a sergeant in the hallway?
Yeah. He even shouted a warning as the sergeant walked right through him. Then he tried to tap the guy on the shoulder, and his hand just passed right through, like he was a ghost or something.
That's when the fear must have really started to set in. So what did he do?
He kept trying to interact with people, went outside, tried to ask a man for directions at an all-night cafe. The man ignored him completely, just walked right through him.
So it wasn't just that people couldn't hear him, it's like he wasn't even physically there.
That's exactly how he described it, like trying to touch thin air. And then that's when the true horror of his situation sunk in. He was no longer solid. He couldn't interact with the physical world anymore.
That's a terrifying thought. Imagine going home for Christmas and even your family not being able to see you.
Yeah, exactly. That feeling of isolation, of being completely cut off, it's a pretty common thread in a lot of near-death experiences. It must have been a truly horrifying experience.
So what happened next? Did he just keep trying to make it to Richmond?
He did at first. He actually describes flying over the Texas landscape, going super fast, passing over towns and cities, tried to stop and ask for directions, but of course no one could see or hear him, like he was invisible.
So did he ever figure out what was going on, why he was in this state?
Well, that's when things take another turn. He remembers the young man he saw lying in his bed back at the hospital. He becomes convinced that's where he needs to return.
So he races back to Camp Barkley, still in this out-of-body state.
Yes. He said flying was faster than any train, but also incredibly disorienting. He arrives back at the base hospital and starts frantically searching for his body.
Hold on, he's looking for himself. But how would he even recognize his own body from that perspective?
That's what makes this part of the story so fascinating. He talked about going from ward to ward, room to room, looking at all these sleeping soldiers, trying to recognize himself. He even mentioned it was difficult because he'd never seen himself in 3 dimensions before, only in mirrors and photographs.
It makes you think about how much of our identity is tied to how we see ourselves physically.
Absolutely. He even thought he might have already passed himself without recognizing his own form. the fear and confusion he must have felt.
So how did he finally find himself? Was there like a moment of recognition?
There was. He remembered his Phi Gamma Delta ring, a very specific ring with a black onyx oval and a golden owl. He realized that's what he needed to look for.
That's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, especially in a place like an army hospital. Did he find it?
He did, eventually. He was going back through the rooms, looking for the ring, and then he found it. It was on the hand of a soldier lying in one of the small rooms.
Oh, no. He realized that soldier was.
Yeah. He saw that the hand wearing the ring was too white, too smooth. It was the hand of a dead man. And he realized that dead man was him.
Wow, that's a heavy realization. What happened then?
He described feeling like he was on a separate planet from his own body, even though they were in the same room. He was grappling with the question of what death actually was, what it meant to exist without a physical form. And it's at this point that everything changes. So we left off with Ritchie face to face with his own lifeless body. He's in this in-between state, and well, that's when things take a really unexpected turn.
So he's there, in the hospital room, with his own dead body. What happens next?
He starts describing this intense light that begins to fill the room, like a million welder's lamps all going off at once.
Okay, now that's an image. Must have been overwhelming.
It was, and within this blinding light, he becomes aware of another presence in the room. A powerful presence.
Wait, is this when he meets Jesus?
Yes, this is the moment.
Yeah.
He describes this overwhelming sense of knowing and absolute certainty that he's in the presence of the Son of God. He says it's not like a thought or a belief, more like a feeling, a visceral understanding.
Wow, that's powerful. It's not just seeing, it's a deeper knowing.
Exactly. And the Jesus he encounters is not like that gentle figure from Sunday school. Ritchie describes him as powerful, radiating this unconditional love, a love that sees everything about him, the good and the bad, and accepts him completely.
This idea of encountering a being of pure love and light, it comes up a lot in near-death experiences, doesn't it?
It does. It's a common thread, this experience of being completely known and loved unconditionally. And for Ritchie, it's a pivotal moment. So he's standing there in this incredible light, and he begins to experience a panoramic review of his entire life.
Hold on, you mean like his whole life flashes before his eyes, like in the movies?
It's more than just flashing before his eyes. He describes it as if every event, every memory, is suddenly there surrounding him, vivid and present, like a three-dimensional mural of his life unfolding all around him. He sees himself as a child, as a teenager, as a young man. He sees it all, the good, the bad, the triumphs, the mistakes.
That must have been intense. Did he say how he felt during this life review?
He mentions feeling overwhelmed, but also a sense of clarity. And as he's watching his life unfold, he hears this question echoing in his mind. What did you do with your life?
That's a pretty big question. Makes you think about your own life.
It does. It makes you think about what really matters. And for Ritchie, this question wasn't about achievements or accolades or anything like that. It was about something much deeper. It was about how he loved, the impact he had on others.
I can see how that would be a tough one to answer, especially when you're standing in front of Jesus.
Right. And so he initially tries to justify himself, pointing to his accomplishments, his plans for the future. He even mentions the insurance money that would be paid out if he died. But it all seems so insignificant in the face of this overwhelming love and compassion.
It sounds like he was missing the point. It wasn't about what he had done, but about who he was being.
Exactly. And the response he gets is filled with understanding and even a hint of what he describes as heavenly laughter, a laughter that acknowledges the absurdity of human concerns in the face of eternity. And then he receives this profound insight. Death can come at any age. A stark reminder that life is precious and we never know how much time we have.
That's a truth we often forget, don't we? So what happened next? Did he stay there with Jesus pondering that question?
No, the scene starts to shift. They leave the hospital room and start traveling at unbelievable speeds, leaving Earth behind. He's embarking on a journey that will take him beyond anything he could have imagined.
Okay, hold on. This is where things get really wild, right? He's about to experience hell.
Yeah, but it's not the hell of fire and brimstone that many people imagine. Ritchie's hell is something else entirely.
I'm all ears. What's this hell like?
He describes first arriving in this huge city full of factories, offices, bustling streets. But something's deeply off. The streets are impossibly crowded, but people are walking right through each other. Inside buildings, same thing. It's like everyone's present but totally disconnected.
So they're interacting, but not really. Can you give me an example?
He talks about seeing these two men walk straight through each other on the sidewalk. He sees this scene inside a factory where a man is dictating a letter while another man stands right behind him desperately trying to grab the speaking tube, but his hand just passes through it.
That's such a strange image. It's like they're ghosts trapped in their own little worlds.
It is, and that's when the realization hits Ritchie. He recognizes that these people are dead, just like him, stuck in this in-between state, still drawn to the physical world, but unable to truly participate in it.
So he's witnessing the afterlife, but it's not exactly a peaceful or joyful existence.
No, it's a place of deep unrest. He sees people consumed by their earthly desires, but unable to fulfill them. He sees a woman begging for a cigarette, but her friend ignores her, lights up her own cigarette, and the woman's hand just passes right through it.
It's like they're shadows of their former selves, still driven by the same cravings and habits. Makes you think about how much of our lives we spend focused on the material world, doesn't it?
It does, and he sees the anguish of these souls who can't let go. He sees a woman following a man down the street, berating him for not taking care of himself. Turns out she's his mother, still worrying about her son, but completely unable to reach him.
That's heartbreaking. She's still a mother, even in death, but her love can't reach him.
It's a powerful example of how our earthly attachments can bind us, even after death. And it's a moment of profound insight for Ritchie. He remembers a verse from the Sermon on the Mount. "Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also."
He's starting to understand that these souls are trapped because they haven't let go of their earthly desires. Their hearts are still tethered to that material world.
And it makes you think, right? What are we clinging to in our own lives that might be holding us back from a deeper connection with something greater?
This is getting pretty heavy. So is this hell just made up of these disconnected souls wandering around?
It gets even more intense. He notices that all the living people he sees have this faint glow surrounding them, a sort of second skin of light. But the dead don't have it.
What do you think this second skin represents?
That's a good question. It could be a symbol of life force or maybe a connection to the physical world. We don't know for sure, but it's a detail that comes up in a lot of NDE accounts.
Ritchie describes this chilling scene in a crowded bar where this second skin plays a big role. He sees these men desperately trying to drink, but their hands keep passing right through their glasses. They don't have that luminous aura, and it's clear they can't interact with the physical world. And then he sees something really disturbing.
A young sailor passes out, and as his body slumps to the floor, the cocoon of light surrounding him splits open. One of the disembodied men who'd been hovering nearby, desperate for a drink, instantly lunges at the opening and disappears.
What, you're saying one of the dead men entered the sailor's body?
That's what Ritchie describes, and he sees it happen a couple more times. Each time someone passes out, their aura cracks open, and one of the dead disappears, almost like they've merged with the unconscious person. It's a terrifying insight into the nature of addiction, even in death.
It's like even death can't break the hold of those desires.
Exactly. And for Ritchie, it's a wake-up call. He realizes these men are trapped in a hell of their own making. Their desire for alcohol, coupled with their inability to fulfill it, it's like eternal torment. And here's the kicker. He realizes he's a part of this hell, too.
Hold on. He's with Jesus, but he's also in hell. How does that work?
He's dead. He's lost his body. He's existing in this realm that's unresponsive to his desires. He's surrounded by people suffering the same fate, consumed by anger, frustration, despair.
But why is Jesus there with him if this is truly hell?
That's the question that lingers in his mind. Even in this torment, he still feels the love and compassion coming from Jesus. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, there's a presence of love and light.
So what happens next? Do they stay in this city of the dead?
No, the scene shifts again, and they find themselves in this huge plain filled with even more disturbing scenes. This plain is crowded with these ghostly figures, engaged in these vicious struggles. They're fighting, biting, kicking, but their blows have no effect.
So it's like a constant battle. But if they're dead, how can they be physically fighting?
Ritchie realizes that they can't physically hurt each other because they don't have physical bodies anymore. It's a battle of wills, a constant struggle for dominance fueled by anger and hatred.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Like pure negativity.
And it's not just the physical violence that's disturbing. He describes witnessing these acts of cruelty, sexual perversions, this constant barrage of hateful thoughts and accusations. He realizes that in this realm, thoughts seem to be more powerful than words. Everything is laid bare. There's no hiding your true nature.
So it's like a hell of exposure. All your darkest thoughts and feelings on display.
Exactly. And what truly horrifies Ritchie is that he recognizes himself in these tormented souls. He hears his own voice in their cries of anger and self-righteousness. He sees his own ego, his own pride, reflected in their behavior. He's forced to confront the darkness within himself, the potential for cruelty and hatred that resides in every human heart. It's a really humbling and terrifying realization.
Makes you think about the darkness that exists within all of us, doesn't it?
It does. And as he's taking in this scene of chaos and negativity, he begins to notice something else, something incredible.
Don't tell me. Angels.
He describes these luminous beings hovering above the plane, towering figures of light, bending down towards the struggling souls below. At first, he wonders if they're angels, but then he realizes he's been seeing them all along. In the cities, the bars, the homes, they were always there but unseen.
So even in this hellish realm, there was a presence of good.
Yeah. He realizes he's been so focused on his own journey, his own fears and desires, that he's been blind to their presence. Even in the darkest corners of this hellish realm, amidst all the suffering and despair, there's this divine love and compassion present, watching over, waiting to be recognized.
That's a powerful image, gives me chills.
And just as he's starting to absorb this truth, the scene shifts again, and they find themselves in a completely different realm.
We've gone from a disconnected city to a battleground of negativity. Where are we headed now?
It's like a veil's been lifted, revealing a world of beauty and serenity, a world of knowledge and understanding.
This sounds like heaven, maybe. Tell me more.
They find themselves in this vast, sunny park dotted with these magnificent buildings. The complex reminds Ritchie of a well-planned university, but as they enter one of the buildings, he realizes this is no ordinary institution of learning.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What's so special about this place?
The atmosphere is hushed, filled with a sense of purpose and deep concentration. They walk down these long corridors lined with tall doorways, and he catches glimpses of these enormous rooms filled with complex equipment, charts, diagrams, consoles flickering with lights.
It sounds like a research facility, but on a grand scale.
Exactly. He sees these hooded figures like monks, deeply engrossed in their work, collaborating, studying, experimenting. It's a world of intellectual exploration, a quest for knowledge and understanding that transcends anything he's ever experienced.
What are they researching, does he say?
He asks Jesus what they're doing, but the answer he receives isn't a verbal explanation. He describes it as a feeling, a sense of awe and wonder. It's like he's sensing this vastness of knowledge that exists beyond human comprehension, the infinite possibilities of the universe. He's witnessing a level of understanding that we can barely grasp from our limited earthly perspective.
It's like he's been given a peek behind the curtain of reality.
It is. And as they move from building to building, he witnesses these incredible feats of creativity and ingenuity. They enter a music studio where sounds beyond human hearing are being composed. He sees a library the size of a city filled with books written on materials he's never seen before.
A library the size of a city. Now that's a bookworm's dream.
Right. He has the thought that these are the most important books in the universe, the key works that hold the secrets of creation.
So is this heaven?
He asks Jesus that very question, but the answer he receives is both affirming and kind of enigmatic. Jesus tells him that these souls have grown and they continue to grow. It's this ongoing process, a journey of evolution that extends beyond the confines of earthly life.
It's like even in this seemingly idyllic realm, the journey of learning and discovery never ends. It's a concept that challenges our typical ideas of heaven. But even in this paradise of knowledge, Ritchie senses that something's missing.
That's right. He observes that these souls, while selfless and dedicated to their pursuits, they don't seem to fully acknowledge Jesus, who's standing right there among them. It's a subtle but profound observation.
So even the pursuit of knowledge and truth can become a distraction from the ultimate source of truth. That's a deep thought.
It is, and it's a question that will linger in his mind as their journey continues. A journey that's about to take them to a place of unimaginable beauty and wonder.
Welcome back to Going Deep on NDEs. So last time we left Ritchie in this realm of pure knowledge, but he felt like something was missing. Where does his journey go from here?
Get ready, because this is where things get really amazing. They leave that world of learning and enter this vast emptiness. But it's not a scary void or anything. It's more like a sense of anticipation, like something incredible is about to happen.
Okay, I'm hooked. So what happens? What does he see?
He sees a city in the distance, but not like any city he's ever seen before. He describes it as a city of light, glowing, seemingly endless. He talks about how its radiance was visible across these huge distances. Even the beings moving within it seemed to radiate light.
It sounds like he's seeing heaven. Is that what he thought it was?
He was completely in awe. He wondered if these radiant beings were those who had truly kept Jesus at the center of their lives, those who had sought him in everything. He wondered if they had become so transformed by love that they were like Jesus himself, radiating his light.
That's a beautiful thought. To be so filled with love that you become a source of light for others. Did he get any closer to this city?
It's like, in answer to his question, two of these radiant beings come shooting towards Ritchie and Jesus across this vast expanse. But just as they're approaching, Ritchie and Jesus begin to move away even faster. The distance between them grows and the city starts to fade.
So close, yet so far away. Why do you think they moved away? Did he say?
He describes feeling a sense of loss, like he really wanted to reach that heavenly city. But he also understood that he wasn't ready. It's like his human perception couldn't handle a full view of such incredible glory.
Like he was being shown the ultimate goal, but he wasn't there yet.
Exactly. He still had work to do, lessons to learn, and then he's back in the hospital room. Those amazing visions are gone, replaced by the reality of his body, lifeless on the bed.
Back to where it all began. But I bet he wasn't the same man who left that room.
Not at all. He had seen the afterlife, talked with Jesus, and seen both the darkness and light waiting for us after this life. He was completely changed by what he experienced.
He woke up with a splitting headache, his throat burning, struggling to breathe, confused and disoriented. Could you imagine going through all that and then just waking up back in your body?
Yeah, it must have been a shock. He remembered the experience, but it felt distant, like a dream. He spent the next few days in a feverish haze, trying to make sense of it all, trying to piece together the memories, those big truths he'd been shown.
Did he try to tell anyone about what happened?
He did. He tried to explain it to the medical staff, the nurses taking care of him, but he couldn't find the right words.
I can imagine. Words don't seem like enough to describe that kind of experience.
He realized that language couldn't really capture it, that it was beyond our understanding. And so he felt isolated. He wanted to connect with someone who might understand, but he was also afraid of being dismissed as crazy.
That must have been so hard to carry around. So what happened to George Ritchie after all this? Did he ever come to terms with it?
He did. He recovered physically, but the experience definitely changed him. He was a different person. He had seen the other side, glimpsed eternity, and it changed his whole outlook. He actually became a psychiatrist, spending his life helping others.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
After going through something like that, he would naturally want to help others deal with life and death.
Yeah, exactly. He used his own experience to comfort and guide those struggling with their own mortality. And years later, he wrote a book about it called Return from Tomorrow.
I've heard of that book. It's a classic in near-death experience stories. It's amazing that something so personal and profound has impacted so many people.
It is. His story has given people inspiration and hope. It offers us a glimpse into what might be waiting for us after this life and shows the powerful impact of these near-death experiences.
So after exploring Ritchie's journey, what are the main takeaways? What can we learn from his experience?
I think his story makes us rethink what's important in life. It reminds us that death isn't the end, it's a transition. And what we do in this life, the way we love, how we treat others, those are the things that really matter.
It's a powerful message. It makes you think about how you're living your own life.
Ritchie's story encourages us to be more loving and compassionate, to focus on what brings us together, not what divides us, to live with the awareness that there's something beyond this life, to appreciate this gift of life and what we can do with it.
This has been incredible, and I think Ritchie's story will stick with me. Thank you for joining us on Going Deep on NDEs. We'll be back with another amazing near-death experience. Until then, keep exploring the mysteries of life, death, and what it means to be human.